Psychedelics today. Mareesa Stertz, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Lovely. So, we saw each other a little less than a month ago out in a really harsh environment, but now we are clean, mostly well. And here we are to talk about your work. You just had me watch this really cool trailer, Confessions of a Psychonaut, which is gorgeous, like nice work. And I remember you telling me about this whole project, like you've been filming yourself for years as part of your like kind of self-discovery journey, and you have kind of a video journalism background. So it was really cool to watch, and I was reminded of a lot as I was going through that. So excited to have you here. How's your day so far?
It's been a good adventure. It's been a short adventure. I woke up really early, and I went right back to bed. So the day has actually just started like 45 minutes ago.
I love that.
Yeah, the film has been an extraordinary, crazy feat. I have been, I don't know. I spent my life thinking, oh, I'm not the kind of person who tells stories. Like, I love theater, and I got behind the curtain was the director because I wasn't very good at acting. And, I was like, well, I'll just tell the people how to interpret the thing. I'm not going to be telling the stories. And then at some point, I sort of had this aha moment and was like, wait a minute, maybe I have a story that is worth telling. And it sort of it happened at the same time while I was getting into documentary film. And, there was one big journey where it was like, the world needs to know what psychedelics are doing. We need to get the word out. And so I started taking it very serious and started filming a lot of my journeys. And turns out I had a pretty, an interesting story. Ayahuasca didn't work for me. I sat like 7 times over 12 years without having a breakthrough experience. And so this is the first part of the story. It's a bigger thing, but it was almost like investigative journalism. Like, why does ayahuasca not work for me? And what is this thing called little t trauma? Everybody's talking a lot about the bigger addiction and really horrendous and hard stories that are out there, but then there's not a lot of attention going to the little things that, everybody's like, oh, my family loved me. It could be so much worse. I'm not going to cry over this hard thing, but then they're living their whole lives with a lot of trauma holding them, little t trauma holding them back. So that's the film. This is what we're diving into.
Love that. First, I want to applaud the bravery of saying that about ayahuasca not working for you. I think like in the Bay Area, that's quite a taboo thing to say out loud in a lot of circles. So I love that honesty.
I mean, I think it's really important. I was so frustrating having it. When I say it didn't work for me, I'll say that, disclaimer here, I think the medicine is actually always working for you. But my experience of it as a person who had heard big stories was like, oh, it's going to give me the breakthroughs and the insights that are going to help me understand why my life feels so broken. And it didn't do that. It just gave me like food poisoning is what it felt like. It was brutal. And then another journey, absolutely nothing, like total numbness, total like disconnect, and for me, it just felt like it didn't work. And, in hindsight, after going to the jungles of Peru, and this is what like a lot of the documentary is about, and doing dietas and, I started to kind of get and since then, I'd say, I've got many years of deep medicine work now. My understanding is that the medicine works like a chisel, slowly chipping away at the edges of all that adrenaline and cortisol our systems have been running with that hasn't been processed. It kind of creates like this hardened shell around us, and the medicine works to slowly chip it a little bit free, dislodge it just a little bit, and at some point you keep with the path, bigger shifts are possible, but they're not going to be right off the bat, or often they're not.
My very first holotropic breathwork experience was like really mild for me, but at the end I had like the sense that some really big things were happening, and eventually I came to it like, even if it's mild, this process has been initiated and things are moving. And yeah, it's an interesting one. Have I talked to you at all about the food poisoning thing around ayahuasca that I've been?
No. No. Tell me.
I've hesitated to write anything about this. It's been on the show a bunch. So there's a type of ayahuasca where they age it for a very long time. sometimes for years and years and years. And to get it ready for consumption, they'll bring it to a boiling point. Well, first they scrape off all the mold and stuff at the top, boil it, chill it, serve it. And, the older it is, the wiser it is, right? I think perhaps in some traditions, it's super legit, like super okay to do. I think to introduce what could be very strong food poisoning to like the Western gut biome and like infrastructure of your gut, like it seems a little edgy and is not really in scope for me. I think like, knowingly getting food poisoning is a little much. I said it to the wrong people and I got in big trouble. I discussed this with some folks and apparently I'm the asshole, but I'm like, okay, well, totally. But like, should all populations have access to all things? I think the answer is no.
There's a lot of things in Peru that like, or in India, you go and it will nearly kill you if you're not used to it. So yeah.
Which is a good initiation, but like, do you really want the risk of death as part of your initiation? We can mitigate that.
Yeah. Let's start with the fresh ayahuasca. For the newbies.
So, where do we want to go from here after my PSA on food safety?
Well, let's see.
Who are you? Let's talk about where did you get introduced to film? We'll start there.
Film. Actually,
Fraggle Rock.
How do you feel? I'm gonna redirect and say, let's just start with the fact that I'm on a big mission. So the reason why I reached out, you and I have talked many times about me coming on this podcast, but we haven't done it until now because I'm like, all right, I'm on a mission and I'm ready to share it. And it's a really good way to weave all the things that I'm doing because I'm doing like a handful of big projects and they're all connected. But without this thread, it doesn't necessarily feel very cohesive, or it might be a little bit disjointed. So I'll start with that if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So I spent a lot of my life without, let's say, the presence of super emotionally balanced human beings and what it looked like to have healthy role models. I'll say that my family is amazing and they did their best and they did a really, really good job in so many ways. And at the same time, they had inherited a lot of traumas and were unconsciously running them. So that being said, I spent my life being like, oh, I love myself. I really do. I know this is a thing I'm supposed to do and I love myself. And I love myself the best way I knew how compared to what I'd learned from my parents and everyone around me. And then I started meeting people who'd been working on themselves and they loved themselves really good. They were really nice to themselves. They didn't like shit on themselves on a regular basis. They weren't hypercritical. They weren't shaming themselves. And it kind of blew my mind. And I started to recognize that there weren't enough stories of what it looked like to be healthy and to show up in a better way. And so, I am a filmmaker, a storyteller. I work as a steward for the Global Psychedelic Society. And I've got this really big project that we're bringing to Burning Man. We're bringing the Sphinxes from the Neverending Story to Burning Man. And the idea behind all of this, the uniting thread of all these things, is that I'm really passionate about creating a culture that celebrates healing, that tells the stories that reflect healthiness, wholeness, that creates community containers where we can co-regulate and we can model this for each other. And where stories of people who have gone through the hard stuff are being shared more often, because what I see on a regular basis is people are like, yeah, I had trauma, I went through it, I don't want to talk about it, it's done, it's in the past, let's move on, right? And it's like, cool, good, I'm glad for you, and yet there's a lot of people around you who are still in the shit, and because we don't talk about it enough, they don't have the role models to know how to get out. They don't even know that it could be different necessarily, so this is for one reason why the advent of the influencer, there's some good sides and there's some bad sides, but this is a big part of what is happening in the world. People are trying to do it more, and that's at least in our bubble especially, but I'd like to see it crest into the mainstream in a good, healthy way. So yeah, there's a little bit of this, and we're raising an army, especially with the Sphinx project coming to Burning Man, and so that's some of the thread there for you.
Love that. So Big mission. Um, and then role models. There's a new Fatboy Slim song, Role Model. I played it at the Burn this year. It's a lovely, weird one, mostly about how he's not a role model. But
Mm.
yeah, like having them is really, really key. I had a few
Mhm.
people that I was kind of like aspirationally, attuned to, I suppose, as a young person. Always hanging out with like the oldest people around because they were doing more interesting things than the 10-year-olds that I was exposed to. So I'm like, oh, these adults are doing cool shit. They just got back from all sorts of interesting parts of the world. And, likely I was surrounded by a lot of psychedelic heads growing up. I just didn't know it,
Oh,
which is neat.
cool.
But
Yeah.
something out of
Where'd you grow up?
southern New Hampshire. So, like, one of, so before the Greenwich Village scene popped off, there was Boston. I'm talking like way back, like pre Beats. And then there was like a music club with Joan Baez and others from the American folk scene. It was like pre psychedelic counterculture movement. And then Western Massachusetts had UMass Amherst, which was very, very psychedelic for a very long time. So likely kind of somewhat competitive, at least in terms of numbers, with San Francisco, in terms of users and uses. So anyway, that's kind of like the milieu and how I kind of justify the Northeast to myself a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you get to swim in that soup of the counterculture and have that as a sort of North Star as you oriented. Would you say there were any like common threads that were a North Star in your community that sort of helped you be the
It was
amazing
mostly
human?
environmentalism and like
Mm-hmm.
how do we, quit being so gross as a species? And it's like maybe a little less football and a little more like spending time cleaning up rivers. So, there's stuff like that. Um, and yeah, like the environmentalism was the thread and like, appreciation of nature, which is pretty helpful because a lot of people didn't have that. And a lot of friends were not able to appreciate nature in the way I was. And I feel really fortunate
Hmm.
for that.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this parsing out of like what are the threads that unite people, and how can we unite under them a little bit? Like what are the new threads, and I don't know. Lately, the Buckminster Fuller quote keeps coming up of we don't like the existing system, so create the new one that renders it obsolete.
Yeah.
Um, and as Annie Oak always says, just throw a better party. Um, so this is what we're doing here. I'm like, how do we? I a lot of the
How early did you get exposed to that line? Because that hit me like I probably learned that quote in like 2007 or 8, and it's been really inspirational to me.
2018, shamefully, right? It wasn't until 2018. I think I heard Liana Galuli at it was at Crypto Psychedelic in Tulum, and I was like, ooh. I actually like filmed that conference. That was like one of my first forays into the psychedelic ecosystem. Um, yeah, and it really landed in a big way. And then I got into the storytelling. So for me, I first went into film thinking I was going to do narratives, and I did some, and they were okay, and I did music videos, and they were okay, and then I got documentaries, and that started taking off. And from the documentaries, I got into the psychedelic. I made a bunch of documentaries, some on Gaia TV about psychedelics, me sort of Anthony Bourdaining the process. And that got me into the psychedelic ecosystem. But I created all that on the outside, not really knowing what the inside looked like. Just thinking, oh my God, the world needs to know. And as I started getting more into the psychedelic ecosystem, I was like, yeah, like people aren't really sharing the stories in a way to help each other orient. So there's that lack of like, I'm on a healing path. I'm using psychedelics, but I don't really know where I'm going. I don't have a map. I don't know what it's supposed to look like because people aren't talking about it a lot because of prohibition and the stigma. And, people were afraid to like talk openly about it. But, I'm a co-founder at Lucid News. And so I got to launch a little series there called Adventures of the Psyche, where I brought leaders in the space onto the program and helped them unpack their story and tell it in a really succinct, juicy way. and take people on the adventure of what their encephalating DMT was like. And that was Kwasi Adusei. And, you know, and just unpack these beautiful stories. And from that, it began to like build steam. Laura Dawn was a guest of mine, and she's like, "Ooh, I really like how you walked me through that. Will you turn that into a program and offer it on my mastermind?" And that's turned into now a course that I've been offering for the last few years, which is, you know, a lot about self-authorship through the lens of both psychedelics and without. I'm working with a lot of teachers and guides and facilitators and people who just need to share who they are independent of their psychedelic work and wrap that around. And then also working with people who are, I'm actually launching a program in the next month, October. Ooh, I have the date somewhere. Late October, on psychedelics and story and self-authorship and how psychedelics can support us in this process. So, you know, there's just been this big mission of giving people the tools so that we can provide those maps for each other. So there's a lot less of like, well, I don't know, I'm taking ketamine, it's supposed to help me. I don't know how. And I'm like, oh, what we're doing, you know, I mean, there's a recent study that came out by Calvin Cartwright Harris and the Arrowids. In short, it's basically pointing out how the mushroom journey mimics the hero's journey. And it's this awesome study because, you know, it's articulating something that I've been seeing and now bringing the hard science to it. And a bunch of other studies have also shown up. Tens of thousands of participants report an increased sense of meaning of life when they look at life through the lens of the hero's journey.
What is the hero's journey?
Ooh, what is the hero's journey? So I know you know, but this is for any of our listeners who don't know, right? So Joseph Campbell, famous scholar, philosopher, writer, thinker, in the 50s, 60s, and probably before, he took stock of the world's myths, and he found that there was a pattern called the hero's journey, or he calls it sometimes the monomyth, and it is it's a series of events that show up in every culture and every almost every time throughout pop culture and cave drawings, Shakespeare, and you know, movies in the theater. This idea that we live our lives in the known world, we hear a call to adventure, and then there's a bunch of challenges, and those challenges build and they build and they build until they run us into the dark night of the soul, the abyss where all feels lost. And that this is actually a useful and necessary process, and it is through navigating this that we learn things and we transform into newer, stronger, more powerful beings. And so what excites me so much about this is if you look at it also through the lens of individuation, Carl Jung's work, the individuation being the process of separating yourself from the conditioning of the collective, and sort of stepping into your own sovereign being. Who are you when you're not living your life to please everyone else and out of that seeking of validation? Who are you when you're living because your heart tells you this is what's most alive? And so the two combined are this brilliant formula that really, I feel like, needs more attention in the world because it makes sense of the abyss. It's like your addiction, your illness, your depression, your breakup, all of these things are not random and horrible bad things that happen to you. No, they're super healthy, natural responses to some belief that you inherited in your original conditioning that disconnected you from trusting yourself. And the abyss is the way this world life helps you become conscious of that programming. And it is by navigating it that you can dismantle it and decolonize it and step into coming up with your own belief for yourself from your own experience. So I kind of feel like I have like this, I'm like, guys, we have the map. We have the secret to life. It's right here. It's so easy and it's already been talked about and it's already accepted. How can we adopt it more, and how can we tell our stories so that it reflects it, so that we're actually modeling what that healthy world looks like?
So from what I recall is you've come up with a framework for helping people frame their lives in the conceptual framework of the hero's journey. Is that right?
I sometimes coin it as the hero's journey of individuation, but yes.
I think that's cooler. Like not cooler. It's like helpful, more specific,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because like I think of when I think hero's journey, I always go to like Luke Skywalker or something, or like Indiana Jones, and it's the George Lucas Joseph Campbell bridge for me. But it's what else? Like this idea of bringing it into us is like fascinating to me. But I can see very regularly how psychedelic journeys or serial psychedelic journeys can become this story. Like the arc can unfold through that series of experiences. Um,
Carl Jung
or
says, Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For those not super familiar with this, until we become aware of all the programming and belief systems and conditionings of your environment and your caregivers and religion and society and blah, 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 until you're aware of it, it runs you like a program. And you are a robot running your instructions according to that, and also according to traumas, right? And and so I've coined it by saying we're all in a process of mucking about, making the unconscious conscious. This is the thread of any story. And that, like, also when it comes to telling a juicy story, if you can include those three ingredients, you've got the framework for a great story. So can I share this little
please,
framework?
please.
Making the unconscious conscious, and using it to tell a story. The ingredients are: who were you before? Well, let me actually say, something big happened, something exciting. It might be a psychedelic journey. It might be you dropped the porcelain bowl in the kitchen and it was symbolic as it shattered of your whole life falling apart. But some action happened that caused a big change, or it marks a big moment of shift and transformation. And the question is, who were you before that thing happened? And how did that thing or those events change you and how you show up now? And if you include these three ingredients in any story, you've got a framework that makes for a satisfying story.
I like that. I thought you were going to say who were you before you were born, which is always a lovely question too, but it's different. Um,
I
but I
have to
like that.
I have to hold myself back from all the tantalizing tangents we could run down, right?
I appreciate that diligence. So yeah, that's neat to have like just three basic starting points, because it's more than just three moments in the monomyth
Oh my,
concept.
yeah, the hero's journey. When you look at it, like people are like, "Oh, why don't you talk about all these other parts of the hero's journey?" And I'm like, "Cause it's confusing, and they're not all essential." But like the Carl Jung, I'm sorry, the hero's individuation, hero's journey is really like, what was the beliefs you had at the beginning? What was the abyss moment that made it all change, and how did it change you? And then like another reason why I find this so valuable, especially when we talk about psychedelics, right? People are still we are where we are with MDMA and the FDA and all the things. And, I think there's still just a lot of like, you and I are in our bubble. I'm sure most of our listeners exist on the edges in our bubble somehow. And there's a lot of the world that has no idea what psychedelics actually look like. And so I think it is imperative that those of us who have the privilege and the freedom to share our stories. And so, this is a big part of the work that I do. I'm like, all you need is these little ingredients. It's super easy. Tell people how that psilocybin journey changed how you showed up in life and gave you the tools to feel your feelings, and what that meant for you. And I like to also have that disclaimer of like, hey, don't go deep into the weird stuff unless your audience is really into it, by all means. I really like to talk about psychedelics as pragmatically as possible and say, hey, I used to show up in life very rigid, controlling, harsh, judgmental. I did a bunch of psychedelics, or some, maybe not a bunch, whatever you want to say. And it changed me. And, or it helped me become conscious of what I was doing, and it helped me change. And through this process, I now show up more allowing, more trusting, more playful, more present, more productive, more joyful, And with that seems to be the recipe to get people like my dad, who's a Trump supporter and conservative and really hated that I was making documentaries about myself doing psychedelics. But it was through these sort of stories that got him to feel on board and go, I don't love that you're doing drugs, but I do love how you're showing up. and it's really fun to be with you now. And so, yeah.
Love that. So the void concept, like I hope, or sorry, abyss. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like for me, it's like I think about those moments where you're just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go forward. But how do you like to frame that?
I mean, I spend a lot of time in that, right? There's so much, like, I think it's a natural response to be in deep resistance and or feel really lost to where you are and not know. What I believe this is here to show us is the depth to which we hold an experience. So, like, I'll just share a little experience. I spent most of my life being like, there's something wrong. I feel broken. I don't know what's wrong with me. And life, like, I just didn't have the resources to go to find a good therapist. I tried to find therapists, but they weren't good matches. I didn't have a lot of money. Tried yoga, couldn't connect to it. It just magnified my pain. I worked with psychedelics a bunch from 16 to 23, but they magnified my pain so much. Worked with them. I was partying. I had some cool breakthroughs, but they magnified the pain more. And then I was just like, these guys are too weird. I don't know. I'm going to put them on a shelf. And so I spent most of my life feeling like something was broken. I had this OCD skin picking issue. I drank too much and I worked too hard and I ran myself deeply into the ground. And in a journey, I hit this really hard moment where I was like, I'm sick. There's something wrong with me. I am broken. And it felt like it was beyond repair. And I was in deep grief because of it. And there was just like no more hiding from it, no more shying away. I had no idea what to do about it. This was like kind of a group journey situation. So I just like spent hours weeping deeply and nobody knew what to tell me. And whatever, aside the fact that nobody knew what to tell me, I wish I could have told myself, hey, this is perfect. You need to understand the depth and the capacity to which you feel all these feelings of brokenness. You spent your whole life having a hunch that there's something here. Now you finally get to face it to the true extent it is and witness and be with it. And I don't think until I went through that I could, I don't think I could have really started a process of transformation and changing and healing until I went through and saw the extent of the depth of the illness and sickness that I felt like I had inside. And I was very unhealthy. So I feel like it's a necessary rite of passage. And if there were more frameworks of just pointing out, hey, that feeling of sickness you've been carrying inside, that's information. And you need to be with that information. You need to allow yourself to process it and presence it completely. And then it can move. If somebody had been telling me that, I think I would have had a lot more orientation to doing it and it would have moved a lot faster. That's my feeling of what the abyss is here to do.
Mm.
How's that fit into your model?
Abyss, the way I would frame like abyss is more around, and not more, but like definitely deep existential despair. Which I think is like the metaphor of like a rock bottom that we would hear about in some addiction conversations, maybe, where it's like, do I really want to be here? Like, I think not being a psychologist or a therapist, this is a little edgy, but I'm like, there's something I think formative about and potentially really important about having some degree of, we'll call it like existential despair, and potentially as far as like light suicidal ideation. Like, I think we have to like go so far as like, do I actually want to be here before we can have like appropriate forms of honesty? And like, obviously I'm not saying everybody needs to be suicidal. I'm saying like, this is a formative experience that I find like I can relate to for a lot of folks. And like, who was it? One of the famous existentialists, I think. Oh God, I usually have this right on the cuff of my tip of my tongue, but having a cold is pulling it away. But the only question is like the Shakespeare question from Romeo and Juliet: to be or not to be. Like, should I live or should I not live? That's the only real philosophical question, according to I think it's Albert Camus. Um, and then like from that moment, that's about as abyssy as you get. You're lost and you don't know how to actually act. And you're like, I only have one real decision because I'm so lost. Not everybody should have that experience, I don't think, but I think it is a really helpful foundational experience. And that's kind of like where I go for like the deep and dark. Like, how do I have some sort of like real foundation to build on? And that helps. It's hard.
You know, yeah, it's really hard. As I'm working with people to help them tell their stories, I don't know where all my students are coming from, and some of them are sometimes still in the abyss, and there's a lot of like real time meaning making, and it's like, you have a story, you've got one foot in the abyss, one foot on the other side of transformation, one foot still the challenges. It's a big messy thing, and what I say is, the worst things in the world may have happened to you, and I'm sorry they did, but being in this abyss, you're learning that you're strong enough to hold it. And at the very least, you are learning how strong you are, that this is an extraordinary gift. And you were talking about a quote. I want to bring this one into the room. The depth of darkness to which you can descend and still live is an exact measure of the height to which you can aspire to reach. Pliny the Elder. And, like this, what I have seen, I like life was pretty hard for me too, right? Like I really went through some deep as well. I went through some really deep abysses where I was just like, just couldn't find my way out. Felt like I was looping, all of it. And now being on the other side, I honor all of that. I am grateful for all the hardship because it has taught me an extraordinary amount of resilience and strength and just capacity to hold vision and stick true. And so, for those folks in that abyss who think that nobody should ever go through that, you're right. And you're learning something really powerful that I believe, like, I don't think I could create the crazy things I'm creating had it not been for this deep abyss, many, many years spent in various versions of the abyss.
Mm. Yeah, like on one hand, it's like saying nobody should ever have the cold or the flu. It's like totally, but once you do, you can have a little bit more empathy, and you can know that you can probably handle it again in the future. For most people, that's why I said probably. But yeah, like I think there's something there. I think there's a lot of value there, and having that strength and lived experience is important. Like I was framing like pet loss recently with like this is preparation for when loved humans go. And it's really fucking hard to lose a pet, but it's also like amazing preparation for like, oh, where did grandma go? Which is part of life. Death is very much part of life. It's about as natural as living is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, where next?
Where next? So let's see. I'll paint my picture here. I'm practicing talking about it a little more. So, okay. So the world doesn't have a lot of stories. I've shared my own story with Confessions of a Psychonaut. We are. I'm actually having a big fundraiser for it at the Shulgin Farm, November 3rd, and probably going to be doing some online funding as well. But this is the story of me filming my own journeys, unpacking, taking people on the journey of what it actually looks like to be working on yourself with psychedelics and the adventure. It took me on such an adventure. So there's one piece of it. I'm teaching storytelling workshops to help others tell these stories. I work with the Global Psychedelic Society. You know this. I'm a steward and a co-founder and a, working a lot with the communications and the strategy. And I'm really, for those folks who are not that familiar with psychedelic societies, I imagine you talk about them on your podcast enough. But, these are communities that have been getting together to talk about psychedelics, to create safe spaces for conversation, education, learning about risk reduction, all of the various things, and to do it really in community, because community is part of the medicine. And again, so much of my abyss moments were because I didn't have a lot of community around me. I didn't have a lot of like healthy role models and healthy spaces. the years 16 to 23 of working with psychedelics, I think I was already reading Carlos Castaneda, but I still couldn't figure out how to piece it together to actually get a journey with some sort of positive outcome or like some productive feeling outcome. It just felt like I was stuck. So I'm very deeply passionate about creating these spaces that allow this sort of community to flourish. Because the moment I found my psychedelic community, everything turned around for me. It was such a powerful part. So we're getting excited. We've got a lot. We're building our membership program right now for leaders. So if you are a person who wants to start a psychedelic community, come find us, globalpsychedelic.org, and check out what we're doing. Follow us on Instagram if you just want to learn what psychedelic communities are doing worldwide. Yeah, we're building and growing. We're doing it in a teal way that's really exciting. I know you had Mike on here not too long ago, and yeah,
It's Mike Margulies, everybody, and we talked a lot about Global Psychedelic Society, and it was earlier this year, I think April-ish, maybe March.
Yeah, we're building a big, exciting movement, and it's getting steam, and we just keep getting new people to join our team, and it's, this is not a top-down hierarchical structure. This is teal. This is as psychedelic as it can get when it comes to power structures, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Nobody's telling the birds to go left or right. It's a sensed feeling of like, hey, what is right in the space, and it's been a really interesting and exciting experiment that kind of was.
How
has
that been going? Like, so we talked about it a bit, and I think I did some reading to help with the Mike episode because that was right around the time that I think it was getting implemented. What do you think about the teal organization concept at this point?
I think it's really important. I think it is, a lot of, as we do our psychedelic journey, we're getting everyone I know, we're like getting downloads of how can we do things better? How can power structures be, how can we be more transparent and open and fair and less corrupt? And teal is really, I've got a lot of excitement for it. At first it was frustrating. It was slow moving, and there was a question of how do we hold the container in the direction that we believe is right when we're just letting other people join in and have a say, but it's proving that because we have created our mission, we've gotten really clear on what it is that we're creating. Everybody who comes on board is a part, like knows that they have to fit within these lanes, and it's been wonderful. And just for anyone who's, doesn't have the time to listen to that podcast, the operating system of teal is the idea that decisions are made. But I should say the org is organized by circles. And what's different is that decisions don't go top down. Rather, members of the org who are most passionate and excited about whatever issue or their circle are empowered to make decisions. And they do that by an advice-giving process. They ask for people who will be affected and people who have experience. They ask for their advice, and they take that into consideration, and they make a decision. And it streamlines the process of operating, and it also takes a lot less weight on the person who would normally be in charge, so things can move a lot faster. And it's really empowering people to step into their zone of genius and what lights them up. So instead of looking to whatever systems exist and the way we're the bureaucratic pipeline, we're now like empowered to do what feels most alive and move with that forward. And it's been joyful.
I love hearing that. That's great. Cool. So after the Shulgin farm, like how are you going to try to be bringing this storytelling, like hero's journey work forward?
I think I'm going to be writing a book, actually. But another part of it, the one other piece that I haven't really gotten to dive into is so we're bringing the Sphinxes from the Neverending Story to Burning Man. For those who don't know, Neverending Story is a really crazy movie from the 80s where the world of Fantasia is under threat by the nothing, the apathy, and just people settling and not living connected to their inspiration. is eating away at the world of imagination, and so our hero needs to save the day. And our hero comes across these two gigantic sphinxes at the edges of Fantasia, and the sphinxes, they're gorgeous, like 6 stories tall. They can look into your heart and see if you know who you are, and that you are worthy, basically. And most people don't. In the movie, most people get fried by lasers that shoot from their eyes, right? It's this really dramatic scene, and it's super beautiful. And, 2018, I was riding across the playa, and I'm like, God, wouldn't it be cool if the sphinxes were here? And my friend was like, yeah, I'll help you. And I'm like, really? And so then I started thinking about it a little more serious. In 2019, I was with a bunch of friends from MAPS, and I was like, guys, wouldn't it be cool if the sphinxes were here? And everybody's like, yeah, we'll help you. And I put it on my Facebook, and strangers got involved, and I have considered it a very slow burning back burner project. We had COVID, and we were like, I don't even know if Burning Man's going to happen. So we're just like once a week meeting for 90 minutes, chipping away at this idea of bringing this big ass project to the burn. And what we realized is, how do we decide whether people know themselves and the worth that they are inherently worthy? They don't have to prove their worth. How do we?
This plays into Teal.
Right. And it plays into storytelling. It plays into all these things. How do we do that? So we're like, oh, let's create a series, like an immersive art experience. We're calling it transmersive art. So transformative immersive art, kind of like Meow Wolf, but directing an inquiry into inwards. Like, what is the thoughts that you have that keep you disconnected in life? How do you store them in your body? How does your body inform the decisions you make? What is the vision of your most amazing self? And how do your thoughts play a role in limiting you or permitting you to do that? And so basically emotional intelligence, and like light therapy in a spirit of play, improv, and art. So these people will come in, they'll go through a series of experiences that take like 45 minutes, collect their wisdom in a talisman, and then bring that to the feet of the sphinxes. And the sphinxes, I don't know, do I want to give it away? Dun, dun, dun. Let me just say there will be lasers, and it will be a big spectacle. And we have an awesome team that has been coming together for years. Serendipity has been our guiding principle. We have our architect who also had the call to bring the sphinxes to the burn, and he created some for a San Diego regional burn, and then his workers were like, hey, these are just sitting in the garage. Can we bring them out for Oktoberfest? And they put them out on the beach in front of Mike Margoli's house. And Mike was like, Mareesa, why are there two sphinxes in my front yard? Mike lives right by the beach, the playa. He's like, why are they on the playa? And and so this is how we found our architect. It's been the wildest thing. Like, I'm living a quest, and it's a lot of energy to bring a big thing to burn, but this is what we're calling we're considering the foundation for a museum of self-exploration. And so all these beautiful pieces and team members we're finding, and we're building, like I said, we're building an army here to help make healing cool, make it fun, throw a better party. All of these will then go on to be part of the Museum of Self-Exploration. Maybe there'll be multiple chapters, multiple in different cities, so yeah.
So sphinxes. I love it. And I think there's going to be a lot of like interesting metaphor that people bring to it on their own. In kind of some traditions that I'm peripherally engaged with, they call it the message of the Sphinx. Mm-hmm. And it's to know, to will, to dare, and to be silent, which is fascinating. It's like the 4 powers of the Sphinx is some way they call it.
To know, say it again.
To know, to will, to dare, to be silent. There's a lot to read into with those things, but it's like, as you dig into more Sphinxy stuff, this will come up for you, for sure.
Cool.
I wonder what Graham Hancock would have to say.
Oh, I would love to chat with him about it. Maybe I should reach out. I should reach out to him. I've met him a few times. We vaguely know each other. What was the tradition
I like him quite a bit.
you said this was?
It's a sort of like Western esotericism. So like, I'm sure there's some of this in Freemasonry. There's some of it in like the magical traditions. Um, I think Eliphas Levi, a French esotericist, was the one that kind of like put that message out to Europeans in like the maybe late 1700s. I forget when he was around.
Wait,
Eliphas Levi. Sorry.
Lifeless Levy?
Eliphas.
Life. That's a weird name.
Eliphas, and then like his last name's kind of like the jeans, Levi. Yeah. Interesting character. I've not read his work directly yet, but a lot of stuff that like is peripheral to his work is like certainly of interest to me. But there was a certain period of time when Europe was absolutely obsessed with Egypt and all Egyptian symbolism, probably for good reason.
It's
But,
pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, we've been in this inquiry of how do we create a culture that celebrates healing? How do we make it cool to work on ourselves and reorient towards that? As like, for me, it's now being on the other side of the abyss. I'm like, ooh, it's a game. I see that. I see the part of where life is a game and I enjoy it and it's a quest and it's an adventure. And how are our obstacles here to help us grow? That is a big inquiry. And I've been really playing with how do we get the sphinxes, like how do we make this experience of the sphinxes coming to the burn and the fundraisers and all the things reflect this game nature and this idea of to know, to will, to dare, to be silent. Feels like some juicy stuff to play with. And we're calling in some awesome, I don't know, game creators and copywriters and people to help dream into how to like actually put this as to actionable touch points for people first learning about the sphinxes who might want to be a part of it or visit it at the
Ooh, that's
burn
right.
or thereafter.
Art installation onboarding. How do you do your like HR onboarding for artists? Like that's super funny. It's like you got to work through this material, and then you get it.
Oh my God.
That's funny.
That's a too high of a bar. We're like,
I get it.
You have some time? Come join us. But no, I mean,
Right.
I would love that to be a part of it. And it's something I was honestly like, oh, maybe we need another year before we bring this to the burn. But it feels very alive to bring it in 25. But I was kind of dragging my feet because these pieces haven't come into place yet. We haven't found those team members yet. So thanks for having me on your podcast, Joe. Let's find those team members.
You got it. Yeah, I'm at the point where I want to start doing some big art too. We'll see. I don't think I have time, but it's what I'm more interested in these days.
Come. Well, see if you can squeak some time and join us a little bit for this next year. Because what I'm seeing also is, my God, I'm so glad. I brought something small to the burn this year, and I brought something to another festival earlier this year, immersive art experience, and it's really nice bringing smaller things that you're not. It is not my biggest baby to the world, but I'm invested and I'm learning so much. And I wish I could do 5 other big art projects before I brought the Sphinxes because there's such a learning curve. So hey, Joe, I have a free learning opportunity for you.
Do I ever? Yeah, right. No, it's an interesting place, and I wonder actually, since it's still kind of fresh for us, like, is there any kind of like hero's journey struggle for Burning Man, like kind of generally, that like feels alive for you to share? I'm sure you thought about it at least once.
I mean, there's so many. This was my 15th burn. I'll just which one? I think you have one. You want to share me yours first?
Oh no, I was just 15 burns is a lot. That's all I wanted to say.
1999 was my first burn. Tickets were $60.
Good God.
I mean, life at the burn before the abyss and after the abyss. I had like a 7-year abyss period of my life. It wasn't all abyss. It was a lot of up and down and, some joy and, all the things. But it was like a deep rewiring, I should say, rather than the full abyss. But the 7-year rewiring process and burn before and the burn after is like worlds different. I used to spend a lot of time just like lots of anxiety, feeling uncomfortable, thinking I was doing things wrong and just and then drinking a lot and trying to like catch the wind and the wave of like, ooh, I'm living and I'm crazy right now and this is fun, and just drunk, with some mushrooms in there maybe. And now, on the other side of it is this year, I don't think I've ever partaken in as few substances at a burn ever.
I
You
think that's what we
nod
talked about when
when
we
we
got
saw each other
together there.
Sunday, right? We're both
Yeah,
remarkably clear right now because we didn't party that hard.
radically underdid it, but I guess it's okay to do that. I still had a lovely time,
Me
turns
too.
out.
Yeah, and it was this year was my own hero's journey was this is a year for showing up, and as is next year of just like I'm not here to go chase the dragon or even to like gain any more clarity. I feel like I have those things. This was the hero's journey of building capacity, and I brought in the art project, this talk box. I should share a little bit about the talk box, but
Please.
I brought it and I had a lot of team, but they all got swept up in things and weren't able to show up on time, and or didn't show up at all or whatever. And yet, like their hearts were committed and they helped me build so much. And there were times where I was just extraordinarily like it was pretty heartbreaking, and I was like, nobody's here. This is really fucking hard right now, and I'm getting 3 hours of sleep. Blah blah blah. And for me, the hero's journey was like, okay, yeah, it was hard, but I didn't cry, and it wasn't that hard. I was fine. Like I know what I can take on. I was able to do it. I was able to bring it in a way that I'm really proud of, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. I would have liked more hands. It would have been a little bit better, but it was a solid, awesome thing, and I was able to pull it. So I built my strength and capacity and resilience, and I got to see it in practice and show up good with it. So that's what my journey was this year.
What is the talk box?
So the talk box, I'm so glad you asked. The talk box is kind of a cross between a confession booth and a voting booth. So it's only the voting booth part only by the looks of it. It's basically this like box where two people can walk in, and there's a separating wall between them, and there's a little wheel, and the wheel has questions like, who are you under your fear? Is this all a simulation? Where are we, or what is happening right now? Like just little questions designed to help people have meaningful conversations and connect deeply. And it comes because I was in Vision a couple years ago and was just like, I came with my roommates and my friends who I spend all my time with all the time, and people were going off doing their own thing, and I already knew them well. And so I'm like kind of by myself going, oh my god, there's so many cool people here. I really wish I could meet them. They're amazing. I can tell they're lovely humans, and I don't know how to meet new people. Like, sure, you can go up to somebody and be like, hi, how's it going? And maybe you'll be lucky and it'll turn into a cool conversation. But most likely you'll have some surface level thing that doesn't go anywhere interesting, and then you walk on your way. Whereas if there was a space in the middle of the walkways where people knew they could have meaningful conversations, and they just went in there when they were feeling like hungry for a talk, they did that. Like, I think festivals and conferences and all kinds of places like this would walk away with much more community that is also wanting to come back because now they know what kind of people they're meeting in these spaces. So yeah, so we have our first iteration and are working on designing it and making it look a little fancier for like more tech or conferencey sort of things. Right now it's made out of wood. It's a little heavy. It was good for the burn. It was robust enough for that, but in development for the next stage, and also looking for collaborators to work on that one with me.
I love that. I love the theme here that there's like multiple things that folks can collaborate with you on, and there's always projects like this, folks. Like it's, you think there's, no way into this weird psychedelic movement. There's so many artists that need help at Burning Man. And given where you live, there's probably at least one project within an hour drive that you could contribute to. If you're living in America. If you're living in Canada, probably almost true as well. Europe's a little harder. But there's still like plenty of artists that you can line up with that are doing really cool stuff. And it's a really great way to build community, is to do art with people.
You're making me like, with the Global Psychedelic Society, it's such a rich network. We have like almost 300 societies, and we really want to help them get more thriving. And it's just like what you're talking about, find your artists and help them build and help create that community even further through the artistic lens. It's almost like, ooh, how do we create a channel that helps new people get involved with the artists in their society and build with them. So whatever, bookmarked for the future. But I
Yeah.
swim in all this potential all the time, and I'm like, oh my God, we have to stop chasing the fun new thing and just, yeah.
Right. Right. How do we slow down and connect with like depth and like connect more with where we are and who we are and what's going on near us. There's a lot of magic locally. It doesn't have to be in Black Rock Desert.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. So what have we missed that feels important to bring forward? I'm sure at least one thing.
Let's see. I feel like I had a note, a list of it. I think we're doing pretty good.
Cool. So people
Oh,
can go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just I think we talked about the upcoming storytelling course we talked about, and um, the Shulgin fundraiser. I'll just say I'm still looking for talent, and I'm putting together this like ride of emerging of like what does it mean to step and go from the stages of a dormant seed of an idea into the blossoming flower and the full expression, and looking for different performers and artists and musicians and space creators to like get involved and help create this event too. I have actually a lot of these people already, but it's just nice to put it out to the ether. The ether has been wildly rewarding once I speak it out, like lots of things come through. So yeah,
I love that.
that's it.
So people can like work with you around bringing this hero's journey thing to their projects. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been offering this as a workshop. So if, like if I sometimes bring this to people's team building setups. I do connection exercises and actually a new process called story catharsis, where we're both helping people figure out what their own hero's journey is and also share it with each other in a connection sort of container. So I offer that and bring that into retreats and whatever team building, corporate environments and things like that as well. So yeah. And then,
Love that.
yeah, at some point there'll be a book, hopefully soon.
Cool. I love that. And your Bay Area focused right now, but are you still traveling a bunch? Nice. Right. That is a substantial lesson that I think people might take away from this conversation is that it can be a really good chapter. Like that's part of the hero's journey is just like adventuring into new and unknown areas, but then like to have some sort of level of depth and engagement with community, it really does require a lot of focused time in a single place.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to buckle down sometimes when you have the ability to not have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's really some amazing, famous ecologist who works in the Midwest. I think his organization is called the Land Institute, and they're working on perennial grain crops. So they're actually developing stuff so you can have very deep roots, season over season, deeper and deeper roots. But one of his critiques that or comments that I never really took to heart myself is that people understand where they're from. If we're talking about growing food and like understanding our ecosystems, like where you grew up, like will speak to you in interesting ways if you decide to be there and learn the ecosystem further and garden there or farm there. And I think there's probably some interesting metaphor for like culture change as well beyond ecosystem engineering, I guess, or farming. So yeah, helpful.
Indeed.
Wendell Berry was the guy's name.
I want to learn more. Yeah, I feel like we spend so much time chasing bright shiny things, and there's not enough stories of that depth that comes when you really nurture and build something over long stretches, or connect to the land over long stretches, or connect to home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I obviously have a lot of shiny things that are in my life. I've been really deep inquiry over the last year, and I'm like, do I need to be working on all these at once right now? This is kind of insane. And the medicine, if it's a journey, or the meditation or whatever, it's just like, nope, you're birthing them all at the same time it's happening right now. But my logical thinking brain could like orchestrate this. It would definitely be like one thing at a time, move more slowly. But what I'll also say is that all of these projects are things I've been working on for years. And they've all been like, most of them have been on back burner. I've been in this process of thinking I had something to give and something to express, for the last, you know, 8 years. I've been like, I got things to say. I should be doing them now, and putting all this pressure on myself. And then for whatever reason, now is actually the time, and all the things are starting to come. So, both end, right? All the things. It's a
Yeah,
wild
I'm
ride.
trying to get myself away from saying but, and it's more of around a yes and. And it feels a lot more fluid. And to your point you made a moment ago, Stan Groff would often say the most interesting things seem to unfold from holotropic breathwork in groups that do it together over a long period of time. So like, because there's like a depth of, I guess, energetic continuity and also safety that's born over time. So, I think that feeds into what we were saying a moment ago.
Yeah, I, the group container is one of the most exciting playgrounds for me. I'm really thrilled. I got to support in the MAPS 23, Psych 23, in the ceremony, the BIPOC ceremony of storytelling, and it was one of the most powerful spaces I've ever been in. As you know, we had leaders sharing these very hard stories, um, and as they shared them, as well as their transformation and the strength and resilience and everything that's come of it. But as they shared the hard parts, especially, it was like, oh, it got disseminated into everyone. And this thing that they had been carrying mostly on their own, suddenly we all held it, and we all got to be with it, and we all got to process it and move it. And somehow, by us sharing that experience, some sort of catharsis comes out that is way bigger than, I think, maybe what could happen with one-on-one therapy, what I've experienced in just one-on-one. There's something so magical, that I want to harvest more of as well. And it comes from that container was created over months with all the leaders getting together and sharing, and all the storytellers, and then the space was really meticulously set as well. Group
Love
coherence,
that.
we need it.
That's right. Field coherence. So, where can people find your work online? I'm sure it's at least at a couple websites.
It's at a couple websites, but the big ones are, Your Story is Everything. That's all the storytelling stuff. The sphinxgate.com,
Oh, you got a
if you want to
website.
get involved in that
Nice.
one. And then, for the film Confessions of a Psychonaut, you can learn more there. I'm looking for producers for that one. I'm like, how do we get this to Gus Van Sant and, some of those folks that have been making amazing thoughts in this vein, or maybe amazing films in this vein. And then, globalpsychedelic.org.
Love it. Love it. Let's figure out a way that the crab can meet up with the Sphinx. I think that's good.
I would.
That'd be really fun.
I know. I'm like, how can is the crab committed always to being a crab? Would the crab do any like mild modifications to putting on a headdress that makes it Sphinxian? I'm trying to not to make
We're
it a
up for
Sphinx,
we're
but
up for headdresses.
headdress.
Yeah, we've been considering dressing it up with all sorts of funny outfits depending on the scenario. So if there's something that we could Yeah, that would be. Let's talk about that. That's funny.
Joe, for those who don't know, Joe has an art car at Burning Man, and also probably, do you ever bring it out where you are in Breckenridge?
We do a couple of local events every year. So we do a event annually called Uller Fest, and that's one of the Nordic snow gods. So where I live, we pray for snow. Some people sacrifice their minds in terms of heavy hangovers for snow, which is, I'm happy for their sacrifice. Thank you. And then also 4th of July, we usually get it out. We're trying to figure out like what else we want to do with it. So we might try to get it out to Denver once in a while, or maybe even go as far as Salt Lake or something.
I love
Yeah.
your art car. It's so cute.
so
And
funny.
those
Thank you.
those I was finding drone shots from other people's video and sending them to Joe and be like, "Look at the beautiful crab across the playa." Cool. Yeah, let's
Such a
brainstorm on
funny.
how the crab can be part of the Sphinx mission and fit in. Wow.
Love it. Is that all your websites?
That's all my websites.
Amazing.
I think. I
All
hope.
right. Well, let's do this again, and hopefully within a year or
Yeah.
less. But yeah,
Ooh.
excited we finally got you on. Thank you
Yay.
for making the time.
Thanks for having me. On Instagram, follow me on Instagram. I put stuff out there regularly at Mareesa_Stertz.
Yes, please do follow. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Mareesa, and looking forward to seeing you hopefully pretty soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Psychedelics Today.